interesting thing about culture to me is that it can be something of a single person that expands to two people, and then to three, and then to four, and then to the point to where it is something an entire group of people embody and do. Because culture can be described as the total activity of a person or people. And more often than not, it has a tilt toward elements, practices, beliefs, thoughts, and activities that a person or group of people wishes to convey to the outside. Because cultural development, oddly, starts with a single person. And by the time a group of people is enacting or acting out their culture, they have no idea where it started or who started it. The originator is long gone, and that person has no idea what was to come because of what they said and did and thought and conveyed. They had no idea that it was going to become this thing, but that's generally how it goes. Because it starts with, I mean, if you can imagine you're by yourself, you know, and you're just out there in the world existing, essentially, and another person stumbles upon you, and you tell them that the sun is God, the actual sun in the sky. It's a literal deity. And you think this because it's there, and then it leaves for a time. And when it leaves, it's a lot scarier. Suddenly, your senses kind of deceive you a little bit. It's almost like a mild form of hell, depending on where you are, who you are, and what you have available to you. But it comes back. And when it comes back, it's beautiful. It's this soft light at first, and you can feel the climate changing in real time right before you. And you can actually look at it with your eyes at first, and it doesn't hurt. It's almost like a welcoming. It's almost like a return of a family member. And slowly it rises up into the sky, and your eyes are of full use, and this thing witnesses all that you do, and it participates in a way. And when it goes away, you just shut off, essentially. You're not even really existing anymore. You enter this other realm. And sometimes that other realm is good, and sometimes it's bad. But you offer this explanation, and you say, because of this fact, I think highly of that thing in the sky, and I pay homage to it. And sometimes when I have some excess, I sacrifice it, or I give it up, or I do this, or I do that. Sometimes on Sundays, or you probably wouldn't say Sunday, but every fourth or fifth day I put on a certain necklace or hunt with a certain tip on your arrow. You do something. You do something to pay respect in some way. And it sounds nice. It all kind of lines up with your experience too. And you think, well, maybe it is. And maybe if it is some kind of God, if I do these things, maybe life will be a little bit easier. Maybe it will favor me. Maybe I can have a relationship there. And this first very persuasive person, and you have to imagine that some people distribute culture, that they are drivers of culture. their activity, their beliefs, their thoughts, the way they are, the things they do, the things they say, the way they live their life, because they are convinced of certain things. And they are so convinced of certain things that to the outside observer, those things are as true can be. And this is going to change over time based off of where we're at and what we know as a species. You know, the situation I'm describing obviously would have been a long time ago. But you also have the moon, you have the stars, you have varying animals that you run across in the wild who are very, very different than you, who look. Imagine seeing these things for the first. Imagine seeing a bear for the first time, a lion. These insects and lizards and these strange creatures. What are you supposed to think is going on? These things have eyes. They clearly observe too. As far as you're concerned, you don't know what they are. Some are dangerous. Some are beautiful. And you're just taking maybe some of your downtime to think about what you just saw. Think about an owl. The way an owl looks at you. I mean, even people today, even me, when I look at an owl, it looks extremely hypnotic. It looks like some wise little flying being. And to be a person of 5,000 years ago coming across an owl staring at you, it's going to flicker off something in your mind. You're going to start thinking some things. You're going to wonder. You're just going to start forming beliefs. And it is our relationship with the natural world, with ourselves, that starts to breed culture. And it's far more than face paint and drums and dancing around a flame. That's the most elementary version of viewing what culture is. It's ubiquitous, especially for us in the Western world. Our culture here is so pervasive and vast and all-consuming and loaded with depth that we don't even really notice it. It's part of our culture to have separation of powers, to choose leaders, to sit in front of judges, to be policed, to attend learning institutions for both scholarly reasons and for purposes of employment. Those things just seem of course, but they are cultural. And those things can be traced very, very far back. And even today there are those who distribute, and there are those who accept and add depth and enrich. By the time you get 100 years down the road, you are reenacting and still sort of wearing the trappings of something that somebody started a long time ago, but you're not having, obviously, the same raw experience of why this person and then those people did what they did. Like, you're just having a completely different experience, and actually you are adding to it. And later on down the road, sometimes we add to it consciously, and sometimes we have no idea we're adding to it. We often don't even know that we are generating something that could be considered culture. When we look at people, even just a single person, they could be wearing aviators. They could be wearing a certain pair of glasses, a certain pair of pants, a certain style of shoes. And just the way that they do that does something to us. We have this urge to emulate. That there's something that kind of passes through us where we're like, you know. And maybe we don't always notice it, but it surely transmits in that way. And you have to consider us today with this vast ability to transmit oneself everywhere. You know, there is a culture within a family. There is a culture within a team, a school. There are these little separate groups that have their own different culture. There is a conspiratorial culture. There's an intellectual, a curious culture. There are different interweaving veins. And part of the reason a person ends up somewhere is because they sort of identify with it before they even get there, which makes them a good candidate for that organization. On a football team, there's usually one person who is the beating heart of that team's culture. There's something about them that creates, sustains, and adds to the entire energy that is the final layer on top of that team. And it's a difficult thing to define, but it's not everybody who does that. For the people who distribute such a thing, it's not intentional. It's not one of those things you can't just say. It's almost like love in a way. You can't just say, I'm going to be a generator of culture. If anything, if that sort of thinking is in a person, it ends up being adverse to that aim. And it really does start with one person. And at different times, it's been different people, different roles in civilizations. But for us, there are so many people, there are so many different eyes on us all the time. And, we don't actually consciously say out loud any of this. It's just sort of an unspoken situation. And it starts with the single person by themselves. I mean, can you imagine a situation where a person is completely isolated, yet there is still a culture there? It almost seems, I would wonder if you need two people at the bare minimum to have such a thing, and then expanding into 3, 4, 5, and so on. But it seems difficult to imagine a single person by themselves without the access or company of other people to generate, because it doesn't seem possible to be able to build or form a momentum. And you need other people around saying yes and no, because it's other people around who will either take on or not take on the thoughts and words and activities of other people around them. That's how this sort of thing refracts and grows and expands and becomes new every day. So it's hard to imagine a single person, by themselves doing such a thing. I don't even think that's possible, to be honest, now that I think about it. But and Western culture is interesting because it almost hit us as something brand new. It completely changed in the Enlightenment period, because it still completely fascinates me to this day, the fact that it was decided at some point to write things down and store it there and continue to expand upon it and have people learn from it and stuff, you know. And then it almost became part of Western culture to invent and then profit and then expand. It almost became a thing to have this idea to where if you had an idea, you should go west if you want to turn it into something larger, especially the United States, because it was the culture of the United States to reward such things. And it was true. And over time, I think people saw the benefits of that and maybe sort of, you know, started to reward it a little bit more, but it's still quite pervasive here, more than anywhere else. And it's just interesting what that can give way to. It's almost like it's the facilitating force that allows all of the ideas that run through a person's mind, ideas that benefit from all consecutive documented ideas, to just make things more and more convenient and better, and to expand what we know about what's happening. And there's even a culture within romantic relationships, and it takes time. It happens over time. And I think in romantic situations, it's like people have a tendency to align. I think that's one of the ways that we do align. And if we do, things are nice. And if you don't, then things are not nice. And I think that's part of what it even feels like to connect with somebody in such a way when you have a similar, people commonly say values, but you could also say a similar predisposition to a certain sort of familial culture, you know. And you can feel it too. And each one is different. And in one way or another, we all contribute, especially this day and age. And if you think about a team, it's crazy how much that thing takes a team to the next level, having a distinct and definable culture. It adds something even more personal. A deeper part of you is committed to this organization, and it just makes you play better, which is kind of a strange thing. And it's similar within a country. It just makes you a better part of that country. It makes you a better part of that family if you are sort of in alignment with, or you accept, or you enjoy, or you even love the general culture of your family. Because it is the total activity of what you do, say, think, and feel. And like I said, at the same time, what is actually displayed are things that are more tilted toward what you want to be displayed. So there are some parts of it that are intentionally hidden. It's almost like the collective shadow or the personal shadow. It's those parts that a group of people know well enough that they prefer to not be out there, which is completely understandable. It's actually not even a bad thing to say that, because obviously among all that we do and say, there are things that we're going to prefer to have said about any situation or any collection that we're involved with. And more often than not, somebody who ends up revealing undesirable elements is somebody who, for whatever reason, just doesn't align with that culture anymore. And an interesting thing can happen with culture when things done for utilitarian purposes or for any purpose really become stylized. Like, there was once a time when certain hats were fashionable, but they served a purpose. Riding horses was once cultural, and still is in some areas. Driving cars is now cultural. Even flight is cultural. Wearing certain sorts of shoes with shoelaces. Using certain sorts of locks with certain sorts of keys. Wearing deodorant. Utilitarian, but also cultural. This is why it is the total activity of a person or people. And over time, those utilitarian things become stylized. And that's when you really start to get movement. Because, like all other things, what we're mostly talking about when we're talking about culture or emotion or anything large or small in terms of human activity is a form of motion. It's not just keys, it's a certain key with a certain look, because when it looks a certain way, more people are more likely to buy it. I like the look of that key. You have an option, a range of options. The body of the car starts to change. Horses are trained a certain way to be better and better. They're bred a certain way. The hats, the colors, they all change, even though it was once utilitarian. There's something about us that sees these things being done or worn or performed or said by a single person, and we think, interesting. And we don't truly know at the time, when we're watching a person wear a certain hat, why they're wearing it. We don't know if they're trying to make some kind of statement, or if it's more effective at blocking sunlight. To us, it looks good, and maybe it blocks out the sun, maybe it does a good job of that, but where can I find that? Or maybe I'll make my own version. It is fashionable. Culture and fashion are forever tightly bound. And that's been the case in familial situations where it's been fashionable to say certain things of your family and of your relationships. It's been fashionable to do certain things. But not all people do these things out of fashion. They do them for utilitarian reasons, or for reasons that can only be felt as the best for all parties involved. I mean, it's not just fashionable to love your wife. It's honestly ideal. And it's not utilitarian either, but it would serve such a purpose. The motivation to love your wife is that you love your wife, and you experience and feel that every day. But there's multiple layers that just continue to expand and expand, because there is always going to be that dividing line between the intention and the purpose of a thing or a word or an activity and the way it's perceived and carried on. And things like religion have been significant because of the questions that they attempted to answer on one level, and the actual physical practices that they brought into being on another. The actual act of building a church and having people go there every Sunday is huge, because it's difficult to get a group of people to do the same thing every week for an extended period of time. It's difficult to find the thing that's going to motivate people to do that. And it ended up having multiple cast-off effects. And there are a couple of things that are like that, but religion has been one of those things that has been so easily used for other purposes outside that. And it's very, very susceptible to that because of what it is. Because it talks about the nature of reality and God itself. It's easy for a person to use the texts and the beliefs and everything within a religion and to use it for the purposes of that single individual. It's all too easy to do that, and that's why over the years it's had serious reputation damage, because such a thing could just so easily be used for nefarious purposes. And religion in and of itself objectively isn't a bad thing. It's what people do with it, you know. And that's true with just about anything, to be honest. But mostly with religion. It's more susceptible to that than anything ever. Because as I sit here for myself personally, it's not easy to get me to believe certain things. It's not easy to get me to do certain things. I have my own ways. But not everybody has that. There are a great many who are searching for these areas to be covered and will become part of the flock, so to speak. Which isn't on its nose good nor bad, but it can be one or the other. And among all of this, human beings have what I would call almost a perfect little center. There's a part of us that remains untouched for the duration of our lives. It is, as they would say, the silent witness. It is the part of us that is always there, always aware. It's the space that all experience and activity skitters across and over, but never becomes part of. It is the thing that we all have in common. And we don't just share it with each other, we share it with everything. By the mere arrangement, the fact of the arrangement of a thing implies a level of intelligence. It just so happens that in human beings, this arrangement has become so crystallized and so arranged so as to bring forth a situation that makes it to where we are aware of ourselves. And we bind time. And you can go across history and inspect various peoples. And across that inspection, you're always going to find the basics of the basics covered within each civilization. But the further you go from the basics, the more frayed the edges get and the more differences you start to see that direct us away from the things that we have in common and drifts us more towards these separating variables. And some of those things, they clash. They definitely clash. Sometimes they're actually completely counter to each other. Directly counter. Because it's easy to draw completely opposing conclusions and opinions from observing the same event. A good example would be the event of a car accident. If I got into a car accident, for me, it's a bad thing. It's objectively a bad thing, but for a mechanic, it's great. I mean, that's exactly what you want if you're a mechanic. But it's not good nor evil on that front. It simply is. And most things are like that. But then there are things that enter a different realm where we could all kind of agree and understand from varying points of view. Some things are just almost all bad, where there's essentially no upside. And it's those things that we punish, actually. And over time, we've learned those things. Like you don't kill people. We all know that. You don't steal. Like these are the basics. There are certain things that we've all come to understand as generally not good for all parties involved. But even within some of those things, the less severe things, we've come up with the discovery of the nuance in each particular case, which is why we set things up the way that we did. We needed a system that has extensive cataloging ability and a way to parse out large volumes of time where there are people dedicated to studying the nuance of each situation, presenting that nuance, and getting as close to the truth on one hand and justice on the other. Because it's this balance between the interpretation that a jury is meant to analyze. And the judge is the facilitating force. The judge facilitates. And I've always been fascinated by the courtroom because it's a microcosm for this entire process that we've been involved with since the beginning. Since the beginning, events have occurred, especially involving humans, humans with other humans, and we need to figure out what happened and why. And there has been countless volumes and examples of people being very, very slippery in those situations. And we're still not on the peak of the mountain in that situation, so to speak, and so much culture has been generated from that scenario. So much of what we've built is because of that scenario, because we need to maintain a sense of trust, and trust is cultural too. You can't have a situation where there is absolutely zero trust anywhere ever. Obviously, you can't have that. Things would simply fall apart without that. So you need a way to keep trust established. And it gets even trickier when you have business, because the idea of business is you don't just want one transaction, you want to continue to have transactions over and over and over and over again. You want things exchanging as often as possible, in as many ways as possible, with as many people as possible. And the only way you can do that is to maintain trust. So if there's anything that comes along that compromises that, you need to reinstate it, truthfully. And some of the largest cultural moments, speaking for the United States, have involved trials. And now we have this ability to record and catalog, as I said, but especially record and bear witness across the country, Things like newspapers and TVs and are new. They're new things, especially TV, obviously, but after the advent of the newspaper, the printing press, the ability to organize a civilization got a lot tighter. A lot tighter. Things changed very, 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 very quickly. And if you look at the production figures and the general growth of especially Western Europe during that time, those places grew and essentially began their position as the center of history, let's say, around that time. And then shortly after came the Industrial Revolution. But before that, it was far more spread out. It was actually far more to the east. But that led to a unification of culture very, 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 very quickly. Because you could pass out this newspaper that had this headline. And upon reading that headline, there is now a set of words embedded within you that was not there before, that has a profound shaping effect on us. And then to read about it, to get the fine details, because that's what this is about. This is about not just a person driving culture. It's not just a person saying something and you just accepting it. There has to be an explanation. And tethered to the explanation, there has to be actions and activities that show some sort of conviction that support the thing the person said. Like if a person on a football team says, "I love you guys," there has to be activity that reflects that down the road and as time goes on. That's what creates that sort of culture. So there has to be a corresponding set of unifying actions and words that sort of puts a bow on it and tightens it and makes it to where this thing is seemingly good enough to where other people can accept it and add to it. And in that situation with the football team, it's usually a certain person with a certain sort of energy that almost everybody on the team likes, to be honest. That person may have a personal and strong relationship with most people on that team. You know, maybe obviously some more than others, but overall, that person is probably going to be the person that most people have an individual relationship with. And to each one of those people, when that person says, "I love this team," they know it. They know exactly why that person is saying that. And they know that that is true. But when they're out there on the field, they're also doing things that are above and beyond. Just through things like additional effort and hustle and showing emotion for wins and losses and saying supportive words when somebody makes a mistake. All of those things support that statement that I love this team. And then you win. And you win, and maybe you lose. But all throughout this culture, this bound, this relationship is building. And it's irreplaceable. Every team needs a person like that. Every family needs a person like that, to be honest. Every country needs people like that. Because it has a way of instilling something in us that pulls us together, you know. And it's more than trust at that point. You know, you might say something like, "I would take a bullet for this person." You know, you say these things that are true. You know, you actually feel that, because that's a pretty strong statement. But if you're the leader of a country, or you run a business, and there is one person in that organization that you would do anything for, it's going to improve and change the way you think about that organization. It's going to change the way you think about that country. If you hate everybody that works for you, I mean, well, what a shitty situation. That would imply that you have a quote-unquote bad culture. If you hate everybody on your team, that would imply that you have a bad culture. If you hate everybody in your country, that would imply that you have a bad culture. It's saying the exact same thing. And it's very difficult to have an organization that you hate with one person that you love. Because more often than not, that single person is going to not be there, not be involved with that, or change it. Or you're going to bring people around who are in line or in tune with that in some way. And we as people come in so many different varieties. And even people who are difficult to get to, who are very individualistic, who are maybe, they don't conform easily, they still have a place where they're going to be able to not just seamlessly blend into, but actually enjoy it. Everybody has a place like that. And from my point of view, when it comes to the family, it's the husband and the wife together. Because, in my opinion, you're going to marry somebody who you kind of just have that cultural thing in line with or connected with, or you're very similar in that regard. So you both kind of become a beating heart, for the entire enterprise. And so much can come out of that. So much radiation can come out of that. And people try to behave as though they have that when they don't, because people know that is the ideal way. People say fake it till you make it. People who are in unhappy marriages, more often than not, tend to want to show that their marriage is happy. But an actual happy marriage comes from two people who, honestly, are just in love with each other. I mean, that really is the center of it all. And when you go all the way back to that dude in the woods who proclaimed that the sun is God, there's a certain love there. There's a certain ineffable distinction that this person is making between the sun and everything else. And in that situation, you can't really help but start to form certain thoughts about it. And over time, as we've had this age of enlightenment, we started to have the scientific revolution as well, and we started finding out more and more what reality is, which in a way kind of removed our, let's say, easy cultural thinking. It comes with change. It comes with change. And that is something that we're always going to be trying to figure out. And we don't really think of it that way, to be honest. We don't really view it that way. We just are. That's just what we're doing. And there's been even dark cultures as well, where the culture is things unfold that you would consider terrible. But even that, the people who are enacting that don't really know what the originator was truly up to. And they can never truly know. Maybe the stories are passed down, and part of the reason why we pass down those stories is because there's some part of us that wants people to hear this story and behave and think a certain way because of it. And that still goes on. And the way the things have gone in the United States is we tend to, I guess, elevate people who seem to naturally generate cultural situations. People who, we call them stars, and there's a reason why we use that word, because they're the sorts of people who evoke a certain feeling that is something that brings eyes. They're the sort of people that people generally want to see and maybe even want to be like. And it's interesting how today, with the complete democratization of such things, it's changing things and making it far more granular. And we all know that in the age of social media and stuff, it is a lot easier to curate and present the desirable things. Easier than ever. And the internet becomes this kind of separate world. For many of us, even within that, we're still extremely sincere. And that's why today, after having gone even this short period of time with the internet and with social media, the thing that we hold most high is sincerity. There's a reason that that's the case. One of the worst things that can happen is you end up being completely incongruent with how you actually are, because there's something about us that despises projecting false images. And we all do that to a small degree, or for some a large degree, but even within that there is a sort of natural course, there's a sort of understandable element of that, but then there's also an excessive element. There's almost a line somewhere where we're deviating too much from the truth, and that's what we don't like, And as time goes on, that's what's going to be rewarded, to be honest. First, it's that similar situation where we're watching a video or listening to somebody on the internet, on YouTube or wherever, where they're doing things that are not too dissimilar from somebody saying, I think the sun is God, and we literally follow them. And over time, things begin to form and change. And in the end, within that situation, the highest outcome that there could be is that person is sincere. And sincere is different than right or wrong. Sincere encompasses both, but sincerity is always going to be one of those largest cultural influencing factors, because it's such a powerful thing. It's sincerity is a sort of alignment between what a person is, what a person thinks they are, and how they reveal that, because between those three, it's pretty easy to get locked up and confused, or to have a desire or urge to misrepresent one of those three. But if you get those three lined up, more than anything, it's a feeling, and its intent is of itself. Its intent isn't necessarily anywhere in the future. It is of itself. It wants to be revealed for the sake of itself, because it's in that revealing that you find those people who are energetically, let's say, or culturally similar or predisposed to be similar. And in romantic situations, if you fall in love, falling in love is the bleeding edge of sincerity. And to hearken to what I was just saying, sometimes some people have to say they love somebody to get to some destination in the future, which is, as I said, what we don't want. We want somebody to say, I love you, because they can't help it, because that's what they feel, you know. And that is the cultural generating force right there. That sort of movement. And it always will be, because it takes on every conceivable form and expresses itself wholly.